probably, and it's been cited as such by a number of people, that the biggest illicit transfer of wealth we have ever seen. Just to put some figures around it, cyber defence now is probably costing the world about $1 trillion annually. I mean, these are ballpark figures, they're not especially accurate, but they give you some idea of the size of the problem. And cybercrime, according to Symantec, it's costing the global economy about maybe $338 billion last year and rising. So there's a lot at stake here. Money, intellectual property, secrets. Former US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said that the US was at the risk of a cyber Pearl Harbor. Now this is pretty dramatic stuff and obviously designed to get the attention of people, but I think he had a valid point that if you're going to be attacked openly and militarily by another country, there are all sorts of indicators that that's likely to occur. You've got to build up your military forces. There's usually a period of time where you get the opportunity to assess what the other side's doing. But in the case of an electronic attack, it may come with very little or no warning. So you don't have any warning time to prepare. And that's what Panetta was referring to there. All right, my final couple of points. What are we going to do about it? Managing the risk. We can't disconnect from the net. We are all wired, and that's the way the world is. So we can't just pull out the plug. Some people have actually tried. It's almost impossible to live in modern society without being connected in some way. So we can't do that. Clearly we need to have what we call a whole of government or holistic responses because this is a societal problem. It's not just a government problem. It's not just a defence military problem. It's a problem for everybody. Uncovered systems, what do I mean by that? Most of the efforts of government go into defending classified systems against cyber attacks, and that's understandable. But the most vulnerable are what we call uncovered systems. They're your systems and my systems. Your computers, your bank account, that's an uncovered system. Nobody's helping you to do anything about that. So that's the big issue for society. And finally, a few solutions. I've long argued that we need to have a lot greater transparency around this issue. You can understand why governments might be reluctant to speak about it for fear of giving away their own countermeasures, for alerting the attacker to what the defence system is. But I think we've got to get over that and start talking about it more frankly and making people aware of the seriousness of the problem and also help them to do something about it. So it has to be a government-led, whole-of-society response in my view. But it's not just government, but the private sector, and indeed all of us have to be able to do something about it. The private sector, for example, has to improve its protocols. It has to build up its cyber defences. It has to be able to communicate better with other businesses as well as with the government. Unless we do that, we're going to remain very vulnerable to what I think is going to be a very serious challenge for all of us over my lifetime, that's for sure. So thank you very much.
Our second speaker in this forum on cyber warfare and cyber security will be John M. Green. John is co-founder of book publisher Pantera Press. He's a company director and the author of the recently published cyber thriller, The Trusted. Writing in the Australian Financial Review, Paul Smith wrote that Mr. Green's research has convinced him that while cyber threats can be reduced, they will never be beaten, and that John also opposes a new law that security agencies say will help them fight terrorists using the internet. So to tell you all about that, welcome John M. Green, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and may I start by apologising. If we're going to be talking about hacking, I have a very bad cold, so I might actually not just be speaking about hacking, but doing something. So I apologise for that. I have 2 words for you tonight that I'd like you to remember when talking about this subject. two very appealing words, dangerously appealing words. Trust me. But why should you trust me? Few of you have ever met me. Plus, I spend half my time in the business world and half my time in the fiction world. So I spend half my time making stuff up, and I'll leave it to you to work out which half. But you trust lots of people you've never met. You trust the people in this house, the politicians. You trust Facebook. You trust banks. You trust your internet providers. But you've never met most of them either. So, at least for tonight, trust me. Now, the cyber revolution, the explosive marriage of technology and globalization, is the best thing that's happened since the Industrial Revolution, or since Kevin Rudd, whichever you prefer. So, a few years ago, I decided to write my latest novel about this. But when the premise for that book, this book, The Trusted, popped into my head, cyber terror and cyber security were hardly the red hot news items that they are today, things that we read about every day in the press. What motivated my book, The Trusted, was the worry that the cyber revolution was being viewed only as all good, all singing, all dancing, and wonderful for us all. But I felt as a novelist and as a businessman that my responsibility was to think about what Alan called the dark side, and how easy it might be to turn all this brilliant, marvellous, and now essential technology against itself and against us through cyber terror and war. I wondered if the marvellous cyber revolution might be opening up stunning opportunities for the bad guys to screw us, especially if they were smart, and especially if they were to masquerade as good guys, the people who we trust. For people to abuse our trust without us knowing it. And it's why I gave my book the title, The Trusted. When I was dreaming up my plot, I didn't foresee what we now know from this month, that the US government was already secretly vacuuming up loads of information from millions of people, minute details of phone calls, emails, internet searches, what's politely called metadata. That was a very well-kept secret until earlier this month, when the Guardian newspaper blew the lid off it after Edward Snowden gave them some information. Until then, until June this year, the most trusted Americans were denying that they were doing this. Trust me, they would say, and foolishly, we all believed them. As recently as the 12th of March, the man who is at the pinnacle of the US intelligence community, the man who serves as President Obama's principal intelligence advisor, James R. Clapper, great name, was asked directly this question in Congress. Quote, does the NSA, which is the National Security Agency, collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans? Unquote. Very simple question. Mr. Clapper's answer was a very simple answer. He said, no, sir, not wittingly. There are cases where it could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly, unquote. But wait a minute. According to the top secret material that Edward Snowden, a former NSA contractor, I might add, allegedly stole and released to The Guardian, that self-same NSA has for years been secretly operating a massive data suction machine called Operation Prism that we've been reading about this month. So how could Mr. Clapper say no when he was asked directly if the NSA was doing this? As he explained, with an astonishing straight face a couple of weeks ago on TV, he was responding in what he thought was, quote, the most truthful or least untruthful manner. If the man who holds his position can't be trusted to tell the truth to his own nation's Congress, who can we trust apart from me? And how all the more ironic these revelations make the intense media and diplomatic battle that we've been seeing over the last year or two that Alan spoke about, that the US has been waging against China, claiming China is the world's biggest cyber abuser. It's no wonder that China's official news agency, Xinhua, this week accused the US as being, quote, the biggest villain in our age, unquote. So it's hotting up. But even if this is cyber tit for cyber tat, it's not funny. But hey, don't think that this is just the US and China doing this stuff. According to The Guardian, the UK is at it too. And even more so, it seems. The claim is that the UK's equivalent of the NSA, the Government Communications Headquarters, or if you watch Spooks, GCHQ, has for the last 18 months or so, in Operation Tempora, gone much further than the US's Operation Prism. Unlike the US, the UK isn't taking and storing the metadata of your communications, just, if you like, the shell of the communications. They're making recordings of phone calls, the contents of your emails, entries on your Facebook, and the history of your access to websites. But wait, the US and the UK are part of what is called the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. The other three eyes being Canada, New Zealand, and yes, Australia. So it's entirely possible that they have shared this information with our own spies, and that our spooks could possibly also be doing this kind of stuff without us knowing. Last week, Foreign Minister Bob Carr answered a question about this and said, quote, as a matter of principle and long-standing practice, the government does not comment on intelligence matters. I do reiterate, however, that we have a strong legal framework to protect Australians, unquote. So, like the US and the UK, our own government is saying basically, trust us. And I really do want to trust them. I definitely want them to catch and stop the bad guys well before they do more bad things. But this trust me notion really troubles me. When you think about it, it's a false syllogism. Good guys don't do bad things. Our spooks are good guys. Therefore, whatever they're doing must be good. Yet we know history is full of good guys doing bad things. Remember waterboarding and the legal opinions that the Bush administration waved around justifying its legality. Now, in writing fiction, we novelists ask our readers to suspend their disbelief. But in the cyber world, the players, and there are lots of them, not just the governments, are asking us to suspend much more. They're asking us to suspend what I see as our healthy distrust, or at least our healthy scepticism of those who hold power. Civil societies insist on putting checks and balances on those in power because we know, just as Lord Acton said in 1887, quote, power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, with the truly awesome power that governments now have to monitor us, which we're reading about, I believe we urgently need a public debate on whether the old rules fit the new technology, to satisfy ourselves, the public, that the tried and true principles behind the grant of search and seizure warrants and the like are being adequately translated for this new cyber realm. It's a realm, in fact, where governments no longer need to enter our homes or our offices at all. We know now that they are collecting our data from ISPs and Google and Facebook and more, but even more worrying, they could, and I hope this is only me, the novelist, speaking, they could remotely switch on the internal camera and mic on your computer and see and hear and record and store exactly what you are doing and saying and to whom and wearing, or in many cases not wearing. This technology, through a malware called Flame, has been around since at least 2007, and I'd be surprised if the governments don't have it. There is, of course, not a scintilla of a suggestion that Australia's security services, nor the UK's, nor the US's, has a J. Edgar Hoover currently in charge, someone riding roughshod over the public's rights. But it's happened before, and I venture to suggest it will happen again sometime. And when that happens, trust me, won't cut it, because by then it will be far too late. And don't forget, there have already been trusted people on the inside, people with all the necessary security clearances who have allegedly betrayed their trust already. For example, Bradley Manning, who it's claimed stole top secret data and gave it to WikiLeaks a couple of years ago. And now Edward Snowden, the NSA consultant who gave this information to The Guardian. Or even, perhaps, I speculate, people inside the security agencies themselves. People who look like good guys. People who look like us, but who are working against us, unknown to their employers. Do you remember the infamous Cambridge Five from the Cold War? Kim Philby, Guy Burgess, etc., who in that Cold War pretended to be good guys and infiltrated the highest echelons of Britain's Secret Service and gave the deepest secrets to the Soviets. So why can't there be people like that in there right now? People who, when I was researching my novel, I found Descartes in the 17th century had already identified and called evil geniuses. As he said, people, I quote, people as clever and deceitful as they are powerful and who direct their entire effort to mislead us, unquote. Now actually, I have found some of these people in some very influential positions, in some very big and important organisations. Now, I made mine up, I admit, and when I put them in my novel, but ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to cyber war, what we are seeing every day now is fiction and fact merging very quickly. And I will show you more of that shortly. But after the Guardian revelations, we should, in my opinion, swiftly embrace what former US President, the late Ronald Reagan, said: trust but verify. And that's what I think we should be doing now. We should be asking our governments to explain what it is they're doing and how it is that we, the public, can be sure that our rights are being protected by that. Now, one reason I'm inclined to trust our government, though I still do want to verify, is two welcome announcements that were made yesterday. When David introduced me, he said, I oppose a proposed law that the government wants to bring in that will help our spy agencies. And yesterday, that law has